Although nuclear energy is being proposed as a climate solution, it isn't. Leona shared a slide earlier that shows you have to ignore the life cycle of nuclear energy to be able to claim that it doesn't have emissions. It obviously has a lot of greenhouse gas emissions going from the mining process up to the construction process of the plants. In addition, when we're being told, oh, we have to build new nuclear in order to get rid of fossil fuels, we get back to the point that Tim was just making about the length of time that it actually takes to approve and construct a nuclear power plant. As Tim pointed out, the last one was many years and many millions of dollars late and over budget. So even if nuclear were, and it isn't, if it were uh, greenhouse gas emission free, the timeline for constructing nuclear power is such that it cannot be brought online in time to actually help. We have cheaper forms of renewable energy, such as wind and solar and batteries, which can be deployed now in less time at less cost and ultimately at less cost to us as both ratepayers and taxpayers. I think that's one of the important components that we need to recognize is nuclear energy is very heavily subsidized. And I'm not going to deny that wind and solar isn't subsidized. It is. But nuclear energy is very heavily subsidized. And that goes from the amount that we pay in tax credits, but also to something that we're unfortunately not going to have a whole lot of time to get into, but the Price-Anderson Act, which basically limits the amount of exposure a nuclear energy company has if there is an accident and shifts so much of the burden if an accident were to happen onto us. This is a setup that was designed in the 50s. It has unfortunately been continued to be extended year after year after year, including just last year. But, Tim and I have fought against this. I'm sure we all have. We're continuing to work on this issue. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot build economically and in a timeline or actually with greenhouse gas emissions such that nuclear is an actual solution to climate change. It's also been touched on that the real reason there's this push for nuclear now has nothing to do with fighting climate change. It has to do with powering data centers and artificial intelligence. That's where this is really coming. The small modular reactors, which as Tim pointed out, don't really exist, but are the big hot thing people are pushing, would be, they're not really that small, but they would be smaller than a traditional nuclear plant. And if you read what companies are saying right now, they're talking about building these to power data centers in neighborhoods. I've seen universities talk about installing them on their campuses in order to have sustainable energy on campus. We see companies talking about building them even for things that aren't data centers. These are going to be, if they ever exist, in our neighborhood. I call it distributed nuclear because that's what it is. It's distributed nuclear in our neighborhoods, increasing the risks that everybody has already touched on. We've talked tonight about the risks to the communities where the uranium is being mined, to the transportation of the uranium to the plants, about how we could ever possibly dispose the waste because we don't have permanent waste disposal. It's an inherently dangerous, expensive electricity source, which has no role to play in the fight against climate change. This is about, in their minds anyway, creating a new power source for billionaires and their data centers and putting them in our neighborhoods. And so all of you in New York tonight should click on the links that my colleagues have been putting in to sign the petitions to urge Governor Hochul to change her position on this, because the last thing we need is New York, or for that matter, any other state, pursuing a build out of nuclear energy, which is going to do nothing for our electricity rates, nothing for climate change, and only going to put us in harm's way to enrich billionaires. And with that, since we're running late, I will stop. Thank you.